Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. I appreciate the opportunity and the discussion on whether increased federal funding in K through 12 schools truly improves student outcome or whether it doesn't. For decades, we've seen Washington pour more and more money into our educational system, operating under the assumption that simply spending more will lead to better student performance. Since the 1960s, taxpayers have spent nearly $3 trillion on federal education funding. That's a lot of money. Per pupil spending in public schools has skyrocketed since then, yet test scores have failed to meaningfully improve. Reading and math scores have either flatlined or declined, and K through 12 public school enrollment has been on a decline. And the COVID pandemic has actually accelerated this trend. Remote learning was a disaster, and $190 billion, I think, as was mentioned, was wasted. Meanwhile, the U.S. continues to spend more per student than nearly any other developed nation. Yet American students are falling behind their international peers. The data is clear. Simply increased spending is not the solution. Rather than continuing to throw money at a broken system, I think we should focus on what actually works, empowering parents, giving states the flexibility to innovate, and expanding school choice so families aren't trapped in failing schools based on their zip code. And I want to give a shout out now to my home state of Georgia, who literally just passed last year and will implement as of March 1st this year, the Promise Scholarship Program. Now, they have capped the amount of money at about $140 million, but that means 22,000 students that are enrolled in public schools right now, in a failing public school, can actually, their parents now have that opportunity to send them to a school that is not failing, so they get a good education. So we're seeing that now. The result, okay, is the state is taking charge and taking action, all right? It's not the federal government. So school choice, whether through vouchers, charter schools, technical education, or homeschooling, forces schools to be more accountable to students and prepare them for the workforce. When families can choose the best educational environment for their children, then the students succeed. We've seen this in states that have embraced school choice, where students outperform their peers in traditional public schools. So I think we need an approach that prioritizes student achievement, reduces federal overreach in spending, and ensures that every student has access to high-quality education. American students deserve a better system than one that prioritizes bureaucracy over results. So, Ms. Gentles, first question for you. You highlighted that academic performance is at such historic lows, such as 70% of 4th and 8th grade students unable to read proficiently, and only 28% of 8th graders proficient in math. Given this undeniable failure, how do you think the money should be best allocated, the federal money?
Yes, and I'd like to reiterate that when we talk about 30% of students being proficient, we have 40% who are below basic. So more students are below basic than are proficient, and that is alarming. We have a crisis on our hands. Allocating funds needs to be done in a way that's student-centered. And I think it was misinterpreted that I was arguing for paying special education teachers more as an argument for increasing funding willy-nilly. No, we need to be smart about how we're allocating funding. So a state like Louisiana that's celebrating education and embracing education freedom, providing options for students, embracing science of reading, improving literacy, both training for teachers, but and then also implementation at the school level, but then also like when they have experienced a challenge with recruiting special education teachers, math and science teachers at the high school level, they've been paying them more. So that allocation matters, not just a big number going up while test scores go down, which chart after chart, state after state shows, but allocating in a wise way. But absolutely at the core, that education freedom has to be there.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Burke, you noted that only 65 cents of every federal education dollar actually reaches the classroom, which is a stunning statistic, with the rest swallowed by bureaucracy. Meanwhile, the Department of Education has ballooned in size, employing thousands of bureaucrats who dictate policy from Washington. In your view, what specific federal programs should Congress immediately eliminate to cut waste, and what steps should we take to ensure that federal education dollars, if they must exist, are spent directly on students rather than expanding bureaucratic payrolls?
Yeah.
Thank you for that question. The onus should be on the Department of Ed and on Congress to justify the continued existence of this failed agency. In terms of what programs to cut, we have used a three-part test to determine what programs to keep. So I'll give you the inverse answer. Is a program ineffective? Is it duplicative? Or is it inappropriate for the federal government to run? If it checks any of those boxes, the program should be cut. That means, as I mentioned earlier, about 90% of federal programs that the Department of Education runs would fail that test, meaning they would need to be cut. Those are largely the programs that are competitive grant programs, not the larger formula-funded programs like IDEA and Title I, where funding would be kept but would be managed by other agencies. In the case of IDEA, moving it to HHS. Same with Title I, for example. Data collection was mentioned at length. Move that over to the Department of Commerce under the Census Bureau, where it would make more sense for data collection to take place. And if I could just quickly on NAEP, because NAEP has come up quite a few times during this hearing, just to put the facts out there, what was cut was not the main NAEP assessment for 9-year-olds and 13-year-olds. It was the 17-year-old long-term trend assessment. So it's two different assessments that we're talking about. I just wanted to put that out there to clear the record. And then just finally, on the research on education choice, which Ms. Gentles talked about very nicely, we have studies that are good and studies that are bad. The studies that are good are randomized controlled trial evaluations that show the effectiveness empirically of a given school choice program. There are 16 of those. Of those 16 studies, RCTs, that have been conducted over time, 10 show positive benefits for all or some students in terms of academic achievement. 4 show null results, no difference between the private school choice program and the public system. And then 2 show negative results. Indeed, 2 show negative results. Those 2 results are unique to one state that heavily regulated its school choice program such that quality private schools refused to participate. And so that's a lesson on overregulation, not on the efficacy of school choice.
Thank you very much. And I'm over my time. I yield back.